if we are going to be getting rid of Dorsey, I think we're going to go back to letting Kevin call the plays, running the kind of offense he wants to do. And then we're going to need a Kevin-style quarterback to do that. And the hot name that is out there right now, and Jack Duffin's been talking about this name for a long time. I don't know if he saw it being available this way, but they just made the move to Penix, and then it came out that they plan on cutting him before March, I believe, or in March. So his next year's salary is essentially going to be being paid by the Falcons, and the Browns could sign him for an extremely affordable, even for us, low dollar amount, and the Falcons could be picking up the tab next year. I think the only reason I think there's a chance this doesn't come to fruition is that Kirk won't want to come play here. If he thinks, if he visits, I know he has the Stefanski familiarity, but if he visits and he doesn't, like Miles said, get that clear sense of direction, like this was a one-off year with a bad quarterback and an identity issue on the offensive side of the ball, and he doesn't think that we're going to be competitive, and he's not going to come here and spend his last year, 2-3 years doing a rebuild with us. You know, he'll have suitors on better football teams, especially considering how cheap he's going to be. So I think that's about the only thing that could cost this, which is why I think Ted Dorsey getting out of here would be important. Kevin could bring him in and be like, we're going to do a lot of what made you good in Minnesota. You know, we're going to get back to that kind of thing. And I think look, we have these weapons, we have this. Me and you know each other well. We've worked well together. Look at this defense we're going to be bringing out. We just made the playoffs with Joe Flacco, who turned the ball every other play. If you can come here and play like the way you did in Minnesota, we can be real life contenders. And if you can sell that dream to them, I think it makes a ton of sense to bring him here.
Absolutely. And I know he hasn't had the greatest year this year in Atlanta, but I just keep talking that the Achilles injury, like when we see these guys, quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, come off a lower body, like a leg injury, Achilles, knee, ankle, ACL, whatever, some of these things, the first year back, there's such a dip in production. It drops off. And we saw it most of this year from Aaron Rodgers. You got to remember, Aaron Rodgers tore his ACL first game of the year last year. So he's had a lot.
Achilles.
What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry, Achilles. Yeah. He's had longer to recover than Cousins has because his was toward the middle second half of the season last year when he tore his. So, and now these last few weeks, you've seen Rodgers start to kind of have the mobility again, kind of look a little bit more vintage Rodgers. And I think next year, Kirk Cousins will be much better than what he is this year, wherever he plays. I think he's going to have a better season. I think he'll look more like his old self. And yeah, if it's affordable, I hope it's in Cleveland, but I guess there is another option being floated around out there.
Yeah. Before we talk about the other option, I do want to say the comment here says Kirk has been so bad, I'd rather deal with Winston again. Like you just said, first year off the Achilles. Also, I don't think they're playing him to his strengths in Atlanta. They got him in a lot more pistol spread. He's a Joe Flacco-ish type.
Oh, yeah. He's a Kevin Stefanski quarterback.
Yeah, play action. And now Kirk, his entire career can sling the ball. He can throw for a ton of yards. And I'm not saying it's a guarantee slam dunk if we bring Kirk Cousins and he's going to be great, but I think he'd be better than any quarterback we currently have on the roster by a long shot.
Mile.
Like it wouldn't be close.
Yep.
So, but does Kirk want to play in the cold every game? He did start his career in Washington, went to college at Michigan State. I had the same thought earlier. It's like he played in the Dome in Minnesota for all that time, and now he's down in Atlanta. But he did start his career at Michigan State. It's cold up there. He did start his NFL career in Washington. So he has played outdoor cold football before. So I think maybe he's older now and he doesn't want to, but I think he could handle that.
I think, playing in Cleveland is when you're home. And it doesn't matter. You could be playing for the Falcons and you got a road game in, December in Cleveland. You got to go there and play. Or just like the Dolphins next week have to come to Cleveland. I mean, it's only the home games that we're talking about because everybody's going to have to play in the cold at some point.
Yeah, I agree. But before we wrap it up here, we do want to talk about this. I've seen this other idea floated for Cousins to be on here, and it would be that we would actually trade Deshaun Watson for Kirk Cousins. And people are going, nobody's going to want Deshaun Watson.
I called bullshit.
He would get cut right away.
As the first time I saw this, I was like, this is fake news, just clickbait bullshit. There's no way the Falcons would trade for Watson. And then I saw Dogs by Nature had an article. Jack Duff and OBR had an article. I'm like, oh, I kind of see where they're coming at this angle now, so we can talk about that.
Did you want to break down then kind of why this could make sense for both teams?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Jack Duffin from OBR, he's been on Kirk Cousins for almost a year now. He was on our show before the season talking about Cousins in Cleveland in 2026 or 2025 as a possibility. And we're like, yeah, okay. And he was like, no, for real. So the Falcons have already moved to Penix. Cousins, obviously, if he wants to play, he's got to get out of there. Like you said, chances are they cut him in March because there's a $10 million roster bonus due in March, so they would cut him before that kicks in. But if they were to trade him with the Browns, now there's a lot of numbers here. I'm just going to kind of fly through the notes. We can do a more in-depth thing about this if it becomes more of a thing in the future. But the Browns, if the Browns trade Watson, it's $80 million dead cap in 25. The Falcons would take on $46 million cap hits for 25 and 26. If the Falcons trade Cousins, it's a $37.5 dead cap in 2025. The Browns would take on $27.5 million in 25 and $45 million in 26, with that $10 million roster bonus coming in 2026. So Jack was saying the Browns could restructure Cousins to a $6.5 million cap hit for 2025. Super affordable in terms of the cap allocation there. And then if they decide to move on and they release him after 2025, it would be dead cap hits of $15 million and $16 million in 26 and 27. Those are big numbers for dead cap, but nothing close to what it is with Watson if we just outright cut him. And then how Jack broke down the numbers, the quarterback swap would mean an extra $27 million of dead cap to Atlanta. So we'd have to trade some draft capital to entice them to take that on, kind of like the Texans did with the Browns and Brock Osweiler. The Browns, he's proposing the Browns send a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and Deshaun Watson to the Falcons straight up for Kirk Cousins. The Browns would carry a dead cap of $108 million for 2025, making next year's roster kind of poor. We wouldn't have a whole bunch of cap space available, but it would clear out Watson's cap in one season, his dead cap in one season, that would be huge for the future. And then it just boils down to, do the Falcons want to cut Cousins for a dead cap of $40 million in 25 and $25 million in 26? Or do they want to trade him, take on $27 million in dead cap in 25 with Watson and gain the draft capital?
And I think
that's a lot. I know.
I think it's a long shot, but I don't think it's not that crazy of a scenario. If you're going to cut the guy and you're going to be paying the quarterback anyways, whether it be Kirk Cousins or Deshaun Watson, why not pick up draft capital if you have that ability? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess my biggest thing would be, would 1 second be enough to entice them to do that?
It just depends, because with the money going back and forth, like both teams have dead cap, tied up in quarterbacks, underperforming quarterbacks coming off Achilles injuries now. Some of the enticing stuff for the Falcons, because there was pros and cons for both that they were listing, and it all made sense. Like for the Falcons, obviously Penix is the starter. Watson can come there, rehab, not have to worry about being the starter at all, because he wouldn't be. Or they could just outright cut him, kind of eat a little bit of that, because there was a high-profile writer for the Falcons. I forgot to write her name down, but she actually responded to Dawgs by Nature, I think it was, and said trading for Watson would not go over well with the fan base in Atlanta. So the only way this happens is if they cut Watson immediately after the trade, just to bring in the draft capital. But, it might be more alluring for Cousins to come to the Browns if Watson isn't here, because
correct.
Then you're sitting there the whole time thinking, well, if I'm not playing great, are they just going to stick this guy back in? They've got a lot of money invested in him. I know they told me this or that, but who knows? So did the Falcons.
No, I agree. I think for any quarterback we'd bring in, not having Deshaun here would be a plus.
Oh, yeah.
Mostly because, like you said, that money, that's always going to be hanging in. Like, if I throw a pick, are they going to put the guy in that they're paying $230? He's sitting there. This is going to be an extremely interesting offseason.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a way more interesting offseason than what the last 2 months of in-season has been for the Browns.
Yeah, so that's why we say make sure you guys follow the show, subscribe on YouTube, tap the notification bell, all that stuff, because all offseason is going to be nuts. We're going to be talking about all this kind of stuff in depth. We'll get Jack Duffin back on the show to talk more about this stuff, have him break it down for you. There's a lot of stuff coming.
Yeah. It's going to be good stuff. It's going to be way better than anything the Browns put on the field for the last 2 months. So make sure you guys are hanging out with us all
low bar,
offseason.
low bar.